Hi folks, this is Tavi Asobi, and today I will be providing a hands-on preview as well as my thoughts on Monster Hunter Rise for the PlayStation 5. Yeah, what better way to do a first video for the new year than with the game series that pretty much built this channel, Monster Hunter. Hopefully everybody's having a good 2023 so far. So yes, Monster Hunter Rise on the PlayStation 5 is finally upon us after its initial stint on the Switch and PC, and that's a good thing. The series, after all, debuted on the PlayStation 2 way back in 2004, and while I enjoyed all its forays on Nintendo systems, there's just something about playing a Monster Hunter game on a PlayStation console that just feels right. By the way, Monster Hunter Rise will also be launching at the same time on PS4, as well as the Xbox family of consoles. That means come January 20th, you get Monster Hunter Rise, and you get Monster Hunter Rise, and you get Monster Hunter Rise. Everybody gets Monster Hunter Rise. In my case, I was provided a review copy for the PlayStation consoles, and so I opted to download the PS5 version, so that's what I will be giving my thoughts on for this video. Now for folks who want to see comparisons between different versions or systems like the PS5, Switch, and PC, the NDA that I signed in order to get a review copy actually forbids comparisons between different hardware versions, so unfortunately I can't do that, at least not until the game comes out. Then all bets are off. As such, I will be mainly focusing on my thoughts about the PS5 version. Also, my thoughts about the base Rise game itself are pretty much still the same as when I reviewed the original version in 2021, so feel free to check my Monster Hunter Rise Switch review for a more thorough take on things like mechanics, monsters, and other features. Heck, check my Sunbreak review as well. Might as well go for broke. Anyway, the good news is that Monster Hunter Rise on PS5 not only looks great, it also plays great to boot. I actually play the game on my ginormous 82-inch TV, which is great at exposing visual flaws, and the PS5 version of Monster Hunter Rise looks like a champ. I can personally confirm that the visuals look nice and crisp, especially the character and monster models, and the backgrounds and textures also look good. Granted, the game is not quite as detailed as Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, but honestly that has more to do with Rise itself, as the game was originally developed for the Nintendo Switch, which is not exactly the most powerful system out there. I mean, it's like processor is what, like 7 years old now? That X1 chip from Nvidia or whatever. And that chip wasn't even new by the time the Switch came out, because I think there was already an X2 chip. Yeah, so even though Rise performs phenomenally for a Switch game, the caveat being for a Switch game, and I love the Switch by the way, yeah, certain sacrifices had to be made to make that possible, and that means less complex environmental details for one. On the plus side, whatever environmental details are present do look nice and clean in the PS5 version. And even more important, at least for me, is the frame rate. And I can say that Monster Hunter Rise for the PS5 thankfully performs well in that regard. And I say that as someone who used to pick the frame rate option when I played Monster Hunter Iceborne on the PS4, on my PS4 Pro. Yeah, so this time I didn't even really need to do that. I was fine with just the default option for the game, which is great. So even with that base setting, the game just felt buttery smooth. And so that's good news for hunters who heavily rely on proper timing. I mean, we are talking about Monster Hunter after all, where timing is everything. And so any weapon benefits from good timing, and that's especially true for any weapon that uses counters and guard points. Yeah, so as someone who likes to use the heavy bowgun's counter moves, for example, as well as constantly tackling monsters with my shoulders of steel, smooth frame rate is especially important, and the PS5 version of Rise delivers in that regard. Yeah, check out those shoulders, man. It's like the shoulders of a god, or a goddess. Yeah, so the only time the frame rate kinda becomes wonky is during cutscenes, which is kinda ironic. Because, you know, usually in games, like, the cutscenes are like the ones that are like perfectly curated, and then the normal gameplay is where things get wonky, but for Rise on the PS5, it's the opposite. So I've noticed, like, when the cutscenes play, it's still prone to some frame rate hiccups, so it's a rare flaw in a game that usually performs well otherwise, when it comes to frame rate. Speaking of performance, Monster Hunter Rise on PS5 gives you 3 main performance options under the display settings. So there's the default option that I mentioned earlier, which strikes a balance between graphics and frame rate. So I'll show the settings that I captured here, and you'll see that default puts image quality at 100%, at least at its base settings, and then you get texture filtering at high, and then shadow quality at average. And then settings such as high resolution textures, ambient occlusion, and foliage sway is also turned on. And then after that, you have prioritized frame rate, and that turns down image quality to 70%, while texture filtering and shadow quality are set to low. Settings such as high resolution textures, ambient occlusion, and foliage sway are also turned off. And then last, you got prioritized graphics, which turns up the image quality to 125%, with texture filtering and shadow quality both set to high. And then settings such as high resolution textures, ambient occlusion, and foliage sway are once again turned on. Now unfortunately, my console capture device can't record 4K nor 120 frames per second, so I was not able to test those features where you have either the graphics maxed out or the frame rate maxed out. Now if I remember correctly, I think previous announcements said that you can go like, 4K at 60 FPS as far as quality, and then for frame rate, you can go 1080p at 120 FPS, I believe. And then one other thing is that my ginormous TV that my PS5 is connected to only goes up to 1080p, which is likely why a lot of my display options are grayed out. So I think if you have a better setup, you should be able to tweak your settings more. Also a quick tip for anyone starting the game who wants to go through the low rank missions much more quickly, just make sure you equip the free defender weapons, as well as the Guild Cross armor set from your item chest. Not only will your hunts go faster, because you do way more damage, you also get a lot more defense, so you can tank low rank monster attacks more comfortably, and won't need to collect green spirit birds around the map since you'll be fine even with your base health bar, after eating a dango set before hunting. Now let's go to my main gripe about Monster Hunter Rise on the PS5, particularly as a veteran hunter. That would be the lack of cross saves. Granted, this really isn't an issue if you've never played Monster Hunter Rise on the Switch or PC before, and so if you're starting from scratch anyway, then it's not a big deal. However, if you've already invested a lot of time on a previous version of the game, then the lack of cross-saving is a major bummer. In fact, Exhibit A would be me. Raises my hand right here. And I say that because I played Monster Hunter Rise not just once from the beginning, but twice. Not to be confused with the fancy K-pop girl group. Yeah, so I invested hundreds of hours on the Switch version after Rise first launched. And then once the Sunbreak expansion came out, I actually had to start from the beginning all over again, because the only copy available to reviewers at the time was the PC version. By the way, the Sunbreak expansion will also be coming out for PS5 and other consoles sometime this spring. Anyway, the result for me is that I'm currently in a weird place with the Switch and PC versions of Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak. Like, I'm super far in the endgame in Sunbreak for PC, but I'm also lacking a lot of the event gear and other items from base Rise, because I had to speedrun through low and high rank to get to Sunbreak, so I could review it in time. And then the opposite is true for my Switch version of the game, where I'm loaded with stuff from Rise, but still working to catch up to the endgame for the Sunbreak content. And as much as I love Monster Hunter Rise, and just Monster Hunter in general, I don't know if I have it in me to start the game for a third time all over again, and then invest hundreds of hours again to get my PS5 version up to speed. Especially since I have other games that I also have to play and review for work. And what makes it even more sad is that the folks I play with are now scattered over various systems. Like, my system of choice right now to play Sunbreak is the PC. And that's because I just like how well the game looks and plays on it. I'd even go so far as to say that the PC version is the best version of the game right now, at least from a technical standpoint. Having said that, most of my friends and family members are on the Switch, and most of them don't want to play on PC unless they can transfer their saves over so they don't have to start again from the beginning. And I really don't blame them because they invested a lot of hours to get to where they are right now. So as a result, I now find myself constantly jumping back and forth between both versions of the game, depending on who I'm playing with. And as anybody who's played Monster Hunter knows, the game can take a huge amount of investment time-wise, even just playing through it once. So having to redo stuff, especially stuff that you've done before, I can see just why some people don't want to do that. And that's coming from someone who's played the game twice now, from the beginning, and invested hundreds of hours both times. It's even gotten to the point where some of the folks I play with say they'll just wait for the next new Monster Hunter game to come out, since we all can't play together right now. And so I think that's a missed opportunity. I mean, I guess crossplay between competing consoles would have addressed that, but I can only imagine how much of a technical lift that would be, so I understand why it isn't an option for Rise, unless of course it's within the same family of consoles, like, between PS4 and PS5, or between different Xbox consoles. So with Xbox One, or Series X, or PC. And by that I mean PC with an Xbox account, because that's apparently the only way that cross-saves are going to work for Xbox and PC, is if you're playing the PC version via the Xbox app or account or whatever launcher that is. So I guess that means if you're playing Monster Hunter Rise on PC via Steam, like I do, then cross-saves aren't even an option with the Xbox consoles. At least from my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because I certainly want to know the information about that too. Yeah, so I can understand if crossplay isn't an option, but cross-saves, however, should be a more realistic solution for those wanting to move to a different console or PC. Even if the way to do it would be like a cumbersome method to prevent hacking. And I say that to folks who remember how it was to move save files from, like, say, the 3DS to the Switch. Which kind of involved jumping through hoops, but it's better than not having the option to do so. Now, having said all of that, Monster Hunter Rise on the PS5 is actually a really good port. I mean, if your main gripe is the lack of cross-saving, then I guess that's not so bad, right? Like, that's pretty good. On that note, who should get the PS5 version? Well, if you've never played any of the versions of Rise before, or prefer to play on console over PC, and don't really care about being able to play the game on the go, then I highly recommend getting the PS5 version of Monster Hunter Rise. That is, unless you don't have a PS5, but have, say, a Series X. Then getting it for that system should be fine as well if you're a console player. And then if you like to be able to play on the go, then of course there's the Switch, or I guess there's Steam Deck if you can make it work out. And then if you already have Rise and Sunbreak on the PC, then there really isn't as much of a reason to switch and start things all over again, unless you just want to play it within the PSN garden with its trophies and other features, or if you have friends who play on PlayStation. And then if you have Rise and Sunbreak on the Switch, there's certainly a case to be made to get the PS5 version. Same thing with getting the PC or Xbox version, just for the graphical and performance leap alone. Just note that you'll have to start from the beginning again, but as long as you're good with that, then hey, that's a-okay. Anyway, I just hope that crossplay, or at least cross-saves, will be an option in the next new Monster Hunter game whenever that comes out, at least for PC and PS5. I mean, if they can make it work for Xbox platforms and PC, then it should be possible for PS5 as well, given how its architecture is closer to PC than, say, like, the PS3. Anyway, those are my thoughts for Monster Hunter Rise on PS5. So what do you think about the PS5 port for the game? As always, if you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. Once again, this is Tabi Asobi, and thank you for watching. Happy 2023, everybody!
Mission complete.